program is and blah, blah. Yeah.
And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Legal Lunch and Learn, a live show where we ask a lawyer your questions on a legal topic. My name is Charlie Long, and I'm a paralegal working here at Maryland Legal Aid within the Community Lawyering Initiative. Along with me and currently behind the scenes is we have our amazing production engineer, Alec Chase, without whom none of this would be possible. Last week, Stacy Bensky was here speaking with us about the payment incentive program, child support arrears, and how they impact driver's license suspensions. Stacy was gracious enough to join us again this week as we continue on with our custody child support trilogy. We're going to be moving on to child support issues as they relate to those with disabilities and those who receive certain types of Social Security benefits. And most importantly, what to do with those child support issues, depending on what kind of disabilities benefits you receive. Now, if you have any questions about this topic, please feel free to put them down in the comments below or send it in a message. Now, no advice here establishes a client-attorney relationship, especially not with me because I'm not a lawyer. I'm just here to get you the information that you need. However, if you do have an immediate legal problem, please contact Maryland Legal Aid by phone at 410-451-2805 or by email at lawyer@mdlab.org. And for those who are in need of captions, this live broadcast will be uploaded to YouTube once it is finished, and it can also be found on the Maryland Legal Aid Facebook page under videos. Stacy, how are you?
Hi, Charlie. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that you joined us again to continue with this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, I know we had some unfinished questions from last week that included arrears with incarcerated individuals, and a few more questions about the payment incentive program. Do you want to start with those questions?
Sure. Yeah. So there were a couple things that I wanted to look up in the law from questions that we had last week. So I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure that I had the correct answer. So in terms of for incarcerated individuals, so there is a law in the Maryland Code, the Family Law article, and it's section 12-104.1 that says that if you're incarcerated for a term, or I'm sorry, if you're sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 180 consecutive calendar days or more, so that's approximately 6 months, then your arrears are supposed to automatically stop accruing. However, we did discuss, so just to reiterate last week, that although they're supposed to stop accruing, that often doesn't automatically happen. So it's something that if you are sentenced and incarcerated for that period of time, 180 consecutive days or 6 months or longer, you probably want to get like a payment summary or something from the child support agency and check to make sure that that was actually done. And if not, then request that adjustment be made for that time that you were incarcerated.
So the arrears stop once you reach the 6-month point, or do you have arrears for that 6 months and then those go away?
So they're supposed to be stopped for the time that you're incarcerated, as long as it's for a period of 180 days or 6 months or longer. So it should be the entire time that you're incarcerated, actually plus 60 days after you're out. But so that's what the law says on paper, but the problem is in effect, that doesn't always happen. So that's why I would encourage people who have been in that situation to, check a payment summary and, either go to your local child support agency or come to legal aid and, make sure that adjustment is properly made so that it should be the entire time that you were incarcerated. If you have a sentence of at least 6 months or longer, that those arrears, they should not be continuing to build up. They should be stopped.
Of course. I think a lot of this for many people has to do with just making sure you're double checking, triple checking, all these things to make sure you're not getting, make sure that these arrears aren't happening for you when they shouldn't be happening. And I mean, it is entirely up to you and your responsibility to make sure you're checking on these things. But if you do need the assistance of a lawyer, please reach out.
Yeah, and then actually just piggybacking off of what you just said, so a big, big issue that we talked about last time also, people had asked about, can this affect your credit score? And it does, and so that was the other thing that I was going to check on, was at what point does the agency report your child support debt or your arrears to the credit reporting agencies. So I just wanted to double check that time period, and it is the same as license suspensions. It's if you are 60 days or more, so 2 months basically in arrears. And similar to the license suspensions, that law also essentially, it's not an automatic, but under the law, but the way that the agency does enforce it is that they do automatically send your information to the credit reporting agencies once you are 60 days or more in arrears. And that law is, again, in the Family Law article of the Maryland Code, section 10-108.1. So that's anyone who accrues. So if you miss 2 months of payments, then it's going to be sent to your debt is going to be sent to the credit reporting agencies.
And again, this is happening to a lot of low income individuals. So already you're in this sort of bad financial place. So if you're not paying your arrears and your driver's license gets suspended, and then you get a bad marking on your credit score and that gets lower, this affects, your job, your housing, so many things. So just be aware of these. It's very, very important that people are aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing that we had talked about in the last question, I think that was from last week, that was lingering from last week, was about the payment incentive program that we talked about. The last thing I wanted to check on was, so I had discussed last week that the requirements for the payment incentive program is just that the obligor or non-custodial parent, which means the person that is ordered to pay child support, the only obligation to be accepted into the payment incentive program is that you have to be below the poverty level. So what I checked on is the exact percentage below the poverty level, and it is that your income is less than 225% of the federal poverty level, and that's based on household size. And just to sort of reiterate why the payment incentive program is so important, because so many people don't know that it's an option, that it's out there, is for forgiveness of state owed arrears. And a little recap again from last week before we get into the new stuff from this week is that state owed arrears come about if the custodial parent, who the children are with the majority of the time, applies for temporary cash assistance, known as TCA, which traditionally is known as welfare. So if the custodial parent applies for TCA benefits or daycare vouchers, so that they can work, so daycare vouchers for the children to go to daycare, then that parent automatically has to agree to assign their right to child support to the state. So the child support doesn't go to them, it goes to the state. And as we talked about last time, a lot of our low-income clients, the families as a whole are low-income, not just the custodial parent. So then if the non-custodial parent misses payments, those arrears that are accrued, they're not actually owed to the custodial. They don't go back to the custodial parent and to the child. They go back to the state to reimburse the state for TCA, or what's traditionally known as welfare benefits.
Right. And I think a good thing that you hit on last week is that those, with the PIP program, it's not, a lot of people go into it thinking it's a handout, but it is essentially a sort of loan, correct?
Right. And well, going back even further before the PIP program is a way to forgive your arrears, but I think just to make sure, to clarify, it's that TCA or welfare people think is a handout, but it's like, well, it's really a loan that then has to be paid back through child support. So the state gets reimbursed for that temporary cash assistance or welfare. But the payment incentive program is a great way to, if you owe those arrears to the state, to potentially get those forgiven if you are able to make 24 consecutive payments.
That is definitely helpful to know for a lot of the families out there.
Right. I'm so sorry. My dogs are barking. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I apologize. Sorry. Okay.
At least none of them are jumping in your lap or dragging your
Yeah, not today.
Okay, so so now we're going to talk about pretty much disability benefits and how they relate to child support issues.
Yep. Yes.
And I know I believe you said before there's a difference between how it affects things like Social Security insurance as opposed to SSDI and things like that.
Sorry. That's Luna. Okay.
But these things affect different benefits differently, right? Am I saying yes?
Yep. Yeah. So essentially, there are different types of disability benefits that people get. So some of them are garnishable for child support and some are not. So the first one sort of that I'll get into is SSI. So SSI benefits, SSI is known as Supplemental Security Income. So which you are qualified to get SSI benefits if you're disabled and you're below a certain income level and you don't have a work history. So the other type of benefits that we'll get into is SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, which means that you have like a work history. So the amount that you get in benefits is based on your work history, similar to Social Security retirement, right? Like how much you get is based on your work history. So essentially SSI is not garnishable at all, even for child support. And the laws also say that SSI cannot be considered income because it's need-based. So need-based meaning because it's based on your below a certain income level, right? So it's not garnishable for child support. So the issue though is that, or what happens to a lot of our clients is that once they start receiving SSI, since it's not garnishable, they might not realize that their arrears are still accruing. So people often come to us with, enormously large amounts of arrears that they had no idea. They'll say, well, I get SSI and I was told, I don't have to worry about child support, that it's not, that it's not, it can't count for child support as income, which is true. But there was still a child support order put in place years before. So what people with SSI need to know is that they need to still file to modify their child support. And then the court, there should be no, argument against it. If your only income is SSI, then the court should agree to suspend your child support so long as that is your only form of income. So this is a big sort of issue with clients who, once they reach retirement age, then they start getting Social Security retirement, which is garnishable, and they have no idea that their arrears were accruing for years and years. So that happens a lot. So that's something really to be aware of. And one thing for clients or for our advocates who are helping our low-income clients to look out for, if you're not sure, like, are my arrears still accruing? If you are still getting notices from the Child Support Enforcement Agency, that means your case is still open with them and your arrears are still accruing. So if you're still getting notices about your license being suspended, your driver's license being suspended, if you're still getting notices that your arrears balance is going to be, as we talked about earlier, sent to the credit reporting agencies, or just in general, sometimes they'll periodically just send you notices of your balance. Well, first of all, if you notice your balance is going up, obviously, your child support, your arrears are, still, it's not stopped, right? But just in general, that if they're sending you notices still, your account with them is still open. Now, the agencies, they do have the authority under the law to close out your case without the need for a court order from the circuit court, but they don't always do it, even if you give them proof that your only income is SSI. I've had many clients where that's the case, and they have in their system proof that the client's only income is SSI, but they don't actually close out the case. So that's why I would suggest, yes, going to the agency and giving them, proof of your disability benefits, but really also taking that next step, going to the circuit court, filing to modify your child support. And a modification is based on a change in circumstance, and that change in circumstance being that you are now disabled, and SSI is your only form of income.
Right. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think everyone should pay attention to those notices. Overall, do not ignore the notices. They're not going to go away.
Right.
Even if you say, I'm going to set this aside for a different day, keep that in the back of your head. Otherwise, these things are going to continue to just accrue on top of, you're just going to have more and more accruances on top of stuff that you can't even pay for.
Right.
It's from ignoring notices from student loans. Sally Mae will come and find you no matter what.
Right. Well, exactly. So the child support debt, it does not go away like a government debt, and especially if it is debt that's owed to the state, like we talked about, like that does not go away, right? Or if it's through the agency, because they're like we had talked about last time, that even once your children are grown, and the agency will still suspend your driver's license and use the same enforcement actions over and over and over and over again, even if the debt is from 30 years ago. Yeah.
It's a bill to pay.
Right. And you also, though, want to be clear that if you're not accruing arrears for something that you shouldn't owe, right? Because if your only income is SSI and you are disabled, you shouldn't owe that, right? But you can't modify child support backwards. So if 10 years later, you go to modify after you've already been receiving SSI, they're not going to modify it back to when you started receiving SSI, because that's just, the law says that you can only modify up to the date that you filed your modification. So that's why it's so important to be on it like right away. As soon as you start receiving those SSI benefits, know that, you need to take an extra step to do, to file them, to modify your child support.
Now, is there a way that they can preemptively do this? Like if they are applying for SSI and, they submit something that says, hey, I applied for SSI waiting for confirmation. Is there something that they could have waiting in the wings?
So you could, so again, you could tell the child support agency. So a lot of times when people apply for disability benefits, they start receiving TDAP, which is temporary disability benefits. Mm-hmm. But again, the child support agency, it really is just a crapshoot. Depends who you end up speaking to, of whether or not they're going to put a pause on your account or not. So I wouldn't count on that. You can file to modify. So a modification of child support has to be based on a change in circumstance. So if you are disabled, you can file to modify right away. However, it's better to guarantee that the court, that you won't have to then go back to court, would be to when you actually have or are very close to file once you have proof that you are disabled and that's your only form of income is SSI, or when you're very close to receiving those benefits.
Okay.
Because then you wouldn't want to have to go back to court then just a few months later or something. So.
Okay. Now I know we've just put out a bunch of information, so if you do have any questions, just a reminder to put them in the comments or send them in a message, whether or not you're a lawyer, someone actually seeking help, paralegal, anyone.
And then the next kind of benefits that we had I touched on before is SSDI benefits. So Social Security Disability Insurance, that's SSDI, similar to, like I said, Social Security retirement, right? So for purposes of this, I'll just call that SSR, okay? Social Security Retirement, and SSDI is Social Security Disability Insurance. Now, both of those are garnishable, meaning for child support. So because they're based on your work history and they're based on income, through what you've paid into the Social Security, when in each paycheck, right? When they take a certain amount out for Social Security. So they are garnishable, but what a lot of people don't know, and what a lot of our clients, what has been a huge, huge help to a lot of our clients, is that if you're receiving either SSDI or SSR, so retirement, if you have a child who is still a minor, then that child is actually entitled to their own benefit based on your benefits, and it doesn't take away from your benefit, it's in addition to. So it's called a third party dependency benefit. Sometimes at Social Security, they'll call it an auxiliary benefit. So this is huge because at Social Security, they generally, maybe sometimes, depending on who you talk to, they'll tell you to apply for that, but usually they don't, because a lot of times clients will come to us and their income, is a lot less than it used to be because now they're disabled and getting SSDI, or maybe now they're retired, right? So obviously those are not going to be as much as you made when you were working. And then a large percentage of it, usually up to 65%, is being garnished for child support, but they're making less. So again, you want to file to modify, right? You want to file that modification in the circuit court, but you also want to make sure that you apply for those benefits on behalf of your child, because what your child gets in their own benefits, in addition to yours, what the law says is that should be subtracted from your child support amount, your child support obligation. And so when you file to modify, that's, your change in circumstance obviously is your change in income, but also you want to get credit for the fact that your child is receiving, they're receiving a type of child support, right, through your benefits, your SSDI or Social Security retirement benefits.
So pretty much, if you they can apply for this auxiliary benefit, because they are on SSDI or SSR, and it can take away from their monthly payment that they
from their child support obligation.
Right.
So basically the auxiliary benefit is for a dependent family member, so a child or a spouse, but since we're talking about, today I'm focusing on the child since it is about child support. But if you get Social Security retirement or SSDI, if you have a dependent family member, so child or spouse, you can receive that auxiliary benefit for them, again based on your work record. So that's really it. It's really important because, like I said, a lot of clients come here and have no idea. And a lot of times the amount that the child is entitled to in that third party or auxiliary or dependency benefit, whatever you want to call, is actually more than what the obligor was ordered to pay in child support. So that helps the entire family, right? It helps custodial parent, it helps non-custodial parent, and obviously it helps the child.
Right.
So it's definitely something a lot of people are not aware of that they should be.
We did have a Facebook question that came in. Does that benefit, the auxiliary benefit, I'm assuming, go directly to the child?
So it does. A child has to have the word is escaping me right now, but I think it's called a representative payee, I think it's called, who's an adult. So usually the representative payee that's is going to be the custodial parent. So the parent that the child lives with the majority of the time. So one thing to be aware of actually is that we have had clients who are the non-custodial parents who try to apply for this benefit on behalf of their kids, and so the Social Security, the local offices have turned them away and said, well, you're not the custodial parent. And I've even had clients who have said, well, I know mom is the custodial parent, here's mom's name, here's mom's address, I'm applying for this benefit for my child, send it to mom's house and have her be, the representative payee for the benefits for my child. and they've still been turned away from the Social Security office. Now, there's no reason under the law that the Social Security agency should turn them away. And it really just depends on what your local agency does, because not all of them do that. So it is something that you also might want to reach out to the other parent and let them know, hey, here's this benefit for our kid, all we have to do is apply for it, because you might need the other parent to be the one that actually fills out the application, because they are going to be the payee, the representative payee for the child.
Okay.
Yep. So great question.
That is a really good question. And these, like the auxiliary benefit, this isn't something that anyone has to pay back in future.
Nope.
This is just something that they can directly get, use.
Right. And yep. And again, because it's based on your work history. So it's like, because you've paid into the system all this time, right? So it's based on your work history. So it's not anything that anyone has to pay back.
Okay, cool. But again, SSDI and SSR can be garnished.
Yes, they can. And that is something that happens automatically. So pretty much as soon as you start receiving SSDI benefits or Social Security retirement, SSR benefits, it's going to be garnished for child support. So that's why this is something to really look out for, to apply when you apply for SSDI or retirement. Also, make sure you put on your application, you have a kid, you have a minor child, and that you're applying for the benefit. Sorry, my dog's again. That you're applying for the benefit for your child as well. They are entitled to it. So
I encourage anyone who has any questions when they're applying about these things to, if you need to, reach out to Maryland Legal Aid or to a lawyer to speak with them. And also just take that further peek behind the curtain, because you never know what benefits are actually out there that can be helpful to you and your family in this kind of situation.
Right, it's very true. And the agencies don't necessarily always make people aware of what they might be entitled to or might qualify for. So it's always worth looking into. Do you think that that's something that might apply to you?
Yeah.
So we had talked about, SSDI and then SSR, so retirement. But there's another kind of benefit that is called concurrent benefits. Now, what that means, because we also talked about SSI, right? So sometimes someone's benefits are partially from SSI and partially from SSDI, or they could be partially from SSI and partially from retirement. Now, usually this would happen if, let's say, you worked your whole life, but you didn't, and now you're at retirement age, but you didn't make enough to have your monthly Social Security retirement amount, you're still below the poverty threshold, the federal poverty threshold, then what you would be entitled to is part Social Security retirement and part SSI, and that supplemental security income sort of bumps you up to, and I am sorry, I don't know the exact SSI number right now. I think it might be like, it's either 700 something or maybe, or 80, it's either 803 or like 783, something around there as the monthly income of the federal, that threshold for the federal poverty level. So if your income is concurrent, part SSI and part SSDI, or part SSI and part retirement, that is also not allowed to be garnished, just like if it was all SSI, okay? Because the idea is, this is to protect people who are in the lowest income bracket, who are just to protect people from poverty. And so that's why the government protects it, and there's federal laws that protect it from garnishment, even for child support. So if that's a situation where your income is partial SSI, often it still is garnished for child support because of their automatic systems. And so that's a situation where you need to have proof of your benefits. So you get that from the Social Security agency, but you need to specifically ask that it shows that the amounts that come from SSI and the amount that comes from the other kind of either SSDI or retirement. and provide that to the child support agency. But beyond that, like I've said before, the agency may or may not actually stop the garnishment. Like, they are mandated by federal laws too, but whether or not they actually do or not, I've seen them do it, I've seen them not. So you really want to, again, file a modification. So you're going to file a request for a modification of child support, or motion to, for modification of child support in the circuit court to be sure that that garnishment is stopped.
Have you ever seen any instances where they didn't honor the modification for something like the concurrent benefits? Any reason?
Yeah, I have. So I have had actually cases where we had the child support modified in the circuit court for reasons such as this, because now the non-custodial parent client, who's our client, their only income is disability benefits. Where the agency didn't comply with the order. It's happened many times. It's taken sometimes months and months and months to get them to comply with the order, unfortunately. So that's why, again, it's something that right away you want to either come to legal aid or just go to, the circuit court and get that filed right away, because the agency can take a very long time, and it's happened many times where they'll continue to garnish months past where the court has ordered that garnishment to stop.
And there's absolutely no, like you talked about how these garnishments automatically happen, they just automatically start. You would think that once you get the benefits or something, it would automatically stop,
right?
Garnishments or suspension or whatever is going on.
You would think so. Yeah, that's a big question that I've had, because so the different agency systems, they talk to each other, which is why when you start getting SSDI or SSR retirement, that garnishment automatically starts. So if these agency systems audit, like child support agency and Social Security Administration, whatever, agency administration, those are interchangeable. If they automatically talk to each other, then why are the garnishments not automatically stopped, or or automatically suspended, the obligation, when someone starts receiving SSI or concurrent SSI with another type of benefit? Because it is federally mandated that cannot be garnished. So that is a question, since I started doing this work, I've been wondering, and that's a really good question, Charlie, is why does the automatic system only work one way?
Right, yeah.
To garnish, but not to stop the garnishment. I don't know.
I guess, the government wants more money.
I don't know. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's something that you would think they would be able to do, because all of these other systems, the license suspension system is automatic, as we talked about last week. The reporting to the credit agencies is automatic. The garnishments are automatic. So you would think the stopping of the garnishments, they would be able to make that automatic too. So if anyone has ideas for what can be done for that,
in the comments
it would help
down below.
Yeah, exactly. It would help a lot of people, and especially these families who are living in poverty, because it hurts the entire family, not just the non-custodial parent.
Of course, because a lot of times, because it's not automatic, people have to go and take that extra step in order to do these things. And sometimes people in low-income families, people who are living below the poverty line, do not have the time or tools in order to kind of make this happen in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I think the tools to do it is a huge one. I think that it's a lot harder to get sort of everyday things done, but really going to court isn't an everyday thing anyway, I mean, but if you have certain limitations, whether that's a disability or your income limitation, it's harder to get these things done, and it's a lot harder to do it without an attorney, right? To navigate the court process is confusing for anyone, but especially, like I said, people who have certain limitations. So it would, and then as we said last week, these automatic things like the license suspensions, so maybe the only way you might be able to see your child or be involved at all in your family would be to help out, to physically be there, drive to their house or help, with drive them to school or activities, but you can't then if your license is suspended. So it's sort of a snowball effect, all of these enforcement actions. Often, like we see here at Legal Aid, for people who are disabled or low income and just struggling and trying, but it pushes them back.
Right. So it just kind of keeps them below that poverty line, which is
right. And we talked about that last week also, the cycle of poverty.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate.
Yeah.
But if you do, like I said, I encourage anyone who is working with SSI, SSDI, SSR, those things, to make sure you're staying on top of the notices for your accruals, if those are happening. Like I said, go deeper and see if there are those auxiliary benefits like the ones that you mentioned for your children, because that's really awesome. Not that I'm entirely versed in the complete legal system, but that's the first time I've ever heard about something like this as it pertains to support that is, allowed. That's a benefit that can actually help and kind of.
Yeah, it helps the whole family, like we said. Yeah. So
that way the person who is, disabled can actually keep some or
right. They can keep actually still their full amount.
Right.
Because the auxiliary benefit is in addition to, and all based on your work record. So it's something that you're entitled to, that your child, your family, is entitled to. You just have to know to apply for it.
Yeah. So look out for that. If that is your situation, please look out and please reach out to a lawyer or Maryland Legal Aid for any of these issues. We are more than happy to help. Do you have anything else going forward about any of these benefits or child support arrearages? I know we've talked a lot.
Sorry. Dog had her little squeaky toy, so I just took it away. Okay.
Animal difficulties.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about arrearages and driver's license suspensions and wage garnishments and things like that. So I hope everyone found this extremely helpful. I know I did. Was there anything else you wanted to share regarding these topics? Anything at all?
No, just, reach out to Maryland Legal Aid. And again, I'm Stacy Bensky. I'm in our community lawyering initiative. So, just don't hesitate to reach out if you think that this might affect you. We have our hotline. What are the best ways to reach? We have, what are the best ways, I guess, to reach us? Is our hotline?
Yes, you can use the CLI hotline, Community Lawyering Initiative hotline. That is 443-451-2805. Leave a voicemail with your name and your legal problem, and we can get back to you immediately in order to do an intake to get you into our system so we can get you the help that you need.
Yep. And then, I was saying, we also are now back out in the community now that
Yes.
COVID is, thankfully kind of, has subsided. So I think our I know we used to have an online calendar pre-COVID days, and I'm not sure. I think you can go on our website and see if our different community outreach events are back up on the calendar. That's another way to
check out and see where we might be.
Right, because we might be closer to your, we go out into the communities, so might be closer to where you live or where you work, and might be easier to come to one of those events.
Absolutely. Again, if you have any questions, if you're having difficulty navigating the court system with any type of child support or custody issue, please contact us. I would like to thank you again, Stacy, for being back 2 weeks in a row. This has been very fun and also extremely informative. I hope if anyone out there learned something from this video, please share it with other people. Next week, we will have CLI, not next week, excuse me, 2 weeks from now, on July 27th, we will have CLI attorney Tim Darby. He's going to be here talking with me about tenants' rights, evictions, and the end of the CDC moratorium that will be coming up since the pandemic is kind of leveling out and dispersing a lot of it actually. So if you have any questions about that topic, please leave them in the comments or message us. Again, if you find this video helpful, share it with other people. If you found the previous video helpful, share it with people. It's on YouTube. It's also on the Maryland Legal Aid Facebook page under videos. But until next time, friends, have a great summer.